You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And happy Easter. Whether you've gone to church or had lots of good sex and food, you've celebrated Easter. The latter is less common perhaps these days, but originally Easter was a fertility feast in honor of the goddess Estra. And today children might be confused as to why bunnies and eggs symbolize Easter, because bunnies don't lay eggs. But those symbols date from a time when the festival for sexuality and fertility was Easter, because they are both fertility symbols. So we have a perfect guest this week, I must say, for the Easter show. She is a living oxymoron and a wonderful one, an ordained Christian minister who is an out, proud atheist. Also, there's been big news this week. Big news. The fruit trees are in blossom, and all the parks are filled with flowering cherries and apples and pear. And also, my voice is slowly but surely returning a little bit better each week. It's still a little ragged around the edges, but you can hear that. You can also, I hope, hear the improvement. Anyway, we have lots to get to, a strange surrealism corner, but then surrealism should be a bit strange, and fighting words, of course. And before any of that, we need to go and look inside the headlines. No, I am not going to take on the special counsel report. Not today. This is because, one, as I write these notes, the report is only just out. So, two, I haven't read it, or at least I haven't read what will be available for us to read. And unlike so many others who haven't read it, three, I would rather opine after I've done so. Four, more important than what the report actually says is what the congressional committees now do. It does seem to me, from the little I have been able to figure out, that Mueller came smack up against Attorney General Barr, wielding the Department of Justice, quote, tradition, that a sitting president is protected from indictment or even accusation of criminal acts. Not a law, not the Constitution, not a statute, just a tradition that would have given Washington, Jefferson, and Madison apoplexy. But there is, shockingly, other news in the world, and this is a chance, perhaps, to glance at some wider stories. While the West celebrates the collapse of the Islamic State caliphate, two things go unnoticed. First, these are basically guerrilla forces who have thoroughly enjoyed having a base in a state and would have liked very much to keep it, but have basically they're at home in a hit-and-run, now-you-see-us, now-you-don't strategy, to which they have now returned by the hundreds and hundreds of thousands. So although a caliphate may be no more, that does not mean that the Islamic State in its diaspora form is gone, and might not even be more dangerous. The other after effect, in no longer having a central place of authority, is what happens to all the families. Yeah. At Al-Haw camp in Syria, more than 72,000 women and children live, if you can call it that, in extreme poverty, massed in tents, surrounded by chain-link fences and armed guards. The soil is too rocky to farm, and there are long lines for food and water. The foreigners section of the camp, which is those 12,000 women who came from the U.S., Canada, England, France, some are Dutch, German, Chinese women are there. They're all clustered in the foreign section. Some long to go back to their countries, but know that's virtually impossible. Many take the position of continuing loyalty to ISIS, and whether this is Stockholm Syndrome showing itself or not, when the New York Times journalists came in to interview women, this was the line they mostly heard. A few places, including France, Russia, and Chechnya, have accepted very small numbers of their citizens back, but most are stuck here in this stateless, unstable territory. There is sickness, there are still untended wounds, and future hostilities are visible in the bitter expressions of the children. None of these so-called victorious countries have plans for these women and children, nor does the United Nations. Some of the women arrived in the caliphate voluntarily, eager to join what they perceived as a revolution, having been recruited as teenagers online with stories of romance and idealism. But some are women who were kidnapped or captured when their village fell to ISIS, and they were sold into marriage or sexual slavery, and rescues not available to them either. This is the forgotten living aftermath, the victims of our triumphs over the caliphate of the Islamic State. Two important surveys deserve our attention. The first is a new Morning Consult Ascend poll, showing that in this period of huge attention to the treatment of women in the workplace, nevertheless relatively few people see positive change, and there is a significant perception gap between men and women regarding progress. Among the highlights of the poll, respondents overwhelmingly support more women leaders and pay equity, but they were less likely to think it was something their company needed to do. Most men think their company treats women and men the same, while women have a much less favorable view. More men believe that men and women are compensated equally. While these findings are not particularly surprising, they certainly affirm the anecdotal data about women's experience in the workplace. Gallup has a new study out, too, one that secularists like me will find quite heartening. Half of Americans are church members, but that's a number down from 70% in 1999. Most of the decline is attributable to an increase of those who say they have no religion. Yet among those who say they are religious, church membership has fallen 9 points. The percentage of Americans who report belonging to a church, synagogue, or mosque are at an all-time low and accelerating. U.S. church membership was 70% or higher from 1937 through 1976, and it fell moderately to an average of 68% in the 70s to the 90s. But the past 20 years have seen a speed up in the drop-off, with a 20 percentage point decline since 1999, and more than half of that change since the start of the current decade. The drop in church membership is consistent with larger societal trends in diminishing church attendance and an increasing proportion of Americans with no religious preference. Generational change has been helping to push the decline. Millennials have a far weaker attachment to religion. Church attendance has dropped more among Catholics than among Protestants, as has the decline in church membership. Although the U.S. is one of the more religious countries among Western nations, it's far less so than it used to be. One of the themes that emerged from the study is that there is eroding confidence in the institution of organized religion itself. While organized religion is not the only U.S. institution suffering the loss of confidence, Americans have lost more confidence in it than in most other institutions. And these trends aren't just numbers. Gallup points out that they play out in the reality that thousands of U.S. churches are closing every year. Religious Americans in the future will likely be faced with fewer options for places of worship, and this will accelerate the decline in turn in church attendance and membership even more. Last, in a cheerful leap from the subject of institutionalized religion to one of scientific profundity, a follow-up to news of the first image of a black hole that we covered last week. At that time, the story had not yet broken that it was a young woman who designed the algorithm that made the image possible. Katie Bowman, a 29-year-old computer scientist, developed a computer program that made the breakthrough image possible, an endeavor previously thought unimaginable. She started making the algorithm 3 years ago when she was a graduate student at MIT. Now she's an assistant professor of computing and mathematical sciences at the California Institute of Technology. She keeps insisting that the project came together because of lots of different people with many different backgrounds. Quote, a melting pot of astronomers, physicists, mathematicians, and engineers all over the world working together, close quote. And that's quite true, of course. And such determined human collaboration, frankly, is thrilling in itself. But it's also lovely that a 29-year-old woman was central to the historic moment when we actually saw the image of a black hole, larger than the size of our entire solar system. We have to take a pause here. We'll be back, though, with our Easter Sunday celebration of an ordained atheist minister and fighting words. And when we come back, we are going to have a rather strange surrealism corner. Then again, that is repetitive. A surrealism corner ought to be strange, no? Stick with us. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back to a stranger than usual surrealism corner. I say stranger than usual because, in sync with April being Poetry Month and my flinging poetry at you left, front, and center, we're going to have a poem for Surrealism Corner. Actually, it's a light verse turning darker poem that I wrote years ago. It appeared in my book Lady of the Beasts. That was published in 1987. And it was about the women of Watergate. And it seemed, with the Mueller report just landing and more stuff coming out every second, it seemed that this was bizarrely timely. I turned my attention to the women because, of course, they didn't have any power, yet they fell with their men. And in some cases, they were really tragic stories. In some cases, they were kept silent through violence. If you don't know these names, they're lookable up. Rosemary Wood was the secretary who managed to cut certain moments of the tape. Maureen Dean was the wife of John Dean, who is surfacing and testifying, in fact, as to what really happened. Now, he was the whistleblower. Martha Mitchell was the wife of John Mitchell, who was the corrupt attorney general. Sound familiar? And, of course, Patricia Nixon was Pat Nixon. And Dorothy, Mrs. Howard Hunt. Hunt worked for Nixon, and she was a carrier of cash, a bag lady in a sense, and she died under very suspicious circumstances because she, so it was said, was about to talk. So I thought that this was ironic and surreal in its repetition. On the Watergate women. Maureen Dean, wearing persimmon summer silk, sits smiling, silent, in the Senate hearing room. Her eyelids droop. She must not doze. She bolts upright, but if she cannot doze, she finds she thinks. She is the second wife. The first says that he never lied. The musings of the second are inadmissible. Martha Mitchell, Cassandra by extension, nurses the bruises from her beatings, nurses her mind from the forced commitments, waits at home, alone, with the terror that all her truths will be seen as comic relief. Dita Beard has disappeared, clutching the heart she was permitted to keep alive in payment for her scandal's death. Rosemary would, if she could, but she can't. Lips sealed by loyalty, for which read fear. A faintly ridiculous scapegoat, as any Good Friday girl could have predicted. The committee wives watch their husbands on TV, alone preferably, so they can smile to themselves at the righteous purity of such judges. All the secretaries hunch at their IBMs, snickering at the keys. What they know could bring down the government. The maids, the governesses, the manicurists, the masseuses avert their eyes. What they know could bring down the family. The mistresses wait for their phones to ring. Afraid to miss the call, they hurry through their vomiting. None of these witnesses would be believed. Some do not believe themselves. And Dorothy, Mrs. Howard Hunt, tucked into her coffin, could hardly testify to the cash, nestled in her lap like a rapist, to the plane's dive through a bleached spring sky, the taste of arsenic on her teeth, the enormous, dazzling wisdom that struck all her brain cells at the impact. Her silence should bring down the nation. But all the while, one woman, sitting alone in rooms and corridors thick with deceit, familiar by now with an unimaginable weariness, having smiled and waved her only life, into a numbness that cannot now recall even the love that was once supposed to make all this worthwhile, having slept out summer in a wintry bed, having borne children who were, neither of them sons, having for years stood at attention so close to power, so powerless. Not Thelma, Catherine, Patricia, Ryan, Nixon. Blamed by the right for her careful stupidity, blamed by the middle for her cultivated dullness, blamed by the left for her non-existent influence, blamed by most men for being unbeautiful, blamed by some women for being broken, blamed by her daughters for their father, blamed by her husband for her cherished mismemory of him as a young Quaker. Not Thelma, Catherine, Patricia, Ryan, Nixon, who as a young girl loved Scarlatti, who wanted to become an actress playing Ibsen, who lost her own name somewhere along the way, who now sits alone in some oversized chair, watching with detached interest how her sedated visions do their best to picket before so many defilements. This is no melodrama. Here is no histrionic pain. This quality of grief could bring down mankind. Time for another break before we return with the conversation. And of course, this week celebrating Easter, it's with an atheist minister from Canada. Canada. Sometimes I think north of the border is where it's at. We'll be right back. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again with the conversation. If you were to go on any given Sunday to the West Hill United Church in Toronto, Canada, you would likely hear the perspectives of a woman who has been tried for heresy. Margaret Ann Vosper, born in 1958, who's known as Gretta Vosper, is an ordained minister of the United Church of Canada, of which that church is a part, and she is a self-professed atheist who's caused a bit of controversy in her time. At age 17, she left high school a year early and enrolled at Mount Allison University. She studied literature, psychology, and religion. She is a Canadian. She moved to the Northwest Territory and married and had a child, the first of a number of marriages. As a single parent, she moved to Kingston, where she enrolled in Queen's Theological College as a candidate for ministry. And in 1990, she earned her Master of Divinity, and so she became a full-blown minister at United Church in Kingston, and then moved to Toronto and St. Matthew's United Church. But in 1997, she became minister of West Hill United Church. And therein lies a story which she will tell. Happy Easter, all you atheists and non-believers and believers and anybody listening. Here is the ordained atheist minister that I promised you, Gretta Vosper. Gretta, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. It's just, I am overjoyed that I'm able to have a conversation with you.
Well, overjoyed seems a bit much, but I am to have a conversation with you, so maybe it's not. You are something really else, and I'm so delighted to have this talk. You are an atheist minister with a congregation that has stood by you through a lot of ups and downs and ins and outs. Tell the story. It's a wonderful, wonderful story. And then I have lots of questions, but bring us up to speed with the basic story.
Okay, thank you. I decided I wanted to become a minister and went into theological college, studied for 3 years, and then went into ministry. And the challenge for me as someone in ministry was that I was taught in theological college that God, was a concept. We struggled with concepts of God, that the Bible was a human construction, that Jesus, everything that was written about him was written decades after he lived, so its authority was questionable. And so as I was leading my congregations, I kind of assumed that they all knew that too. And then I found out quite by surprise that every time I used the word God, a lot of them were still assuming I meant, this being that lives in some other realm that intervenes in human affairs. And I didn't. So I really needed to figure out what to do with that. I was very uncomfortable maintaining the status quo. But without knowing what to do with it, I let it lapse for a few months until one Sunday, I didn't have a sermon ready. And so I stood up and completely deconstructed the idea of God. And,
yeah. Just that.
It was a surprise.
This is the United Church of Canada, right?
Yes.
And it's a Christian denomination, Protestant.
Yes, it is.
Okay, go on.
Well, once I'd done that, I realized that there might be some concern that I could continue to lead the congregation, which is not a surprise. So the board and I had a meeting, and I didn't expect them to fire me, but I wouldn't have been surprised that I went in prepared for that if they were going to not want me to continue. But many of them had actually been reading some contemporary scholarship on Christianity that has been made accessible through, the late Marcus Borg and through Bishop John Shelby Spong. So they weren't really as surprised as I thought they might be.
Interesting.
And yeah, so they rather than saying, we can't go on like this, they said, what's it going to look like? And I said, I don't know. And they said, well, let's find out. And so they started this journey. I don't think it was me that started the journey. It was they who started the journey.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. It's so civilized for a religious institution of any sort.
Well, these were very brave people, and they wanted to be able to reflect in their services what it was that many of them had come to understand through, reading the books that they had. Mm-hmm. So we decided to move on from there. The first thing they wanted to do was write a statement of faith so that they could identify where they were. And if I went to another church, no one could come in and pull them backwards. But this, as you know, what statements of faith do? They divide communities.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing they realized. The first thing that someone said, which was, it needs to say the Bible is not the authoritative word of God. And someone said, but there might be people in the congregation who believe that. So instead, they left the idea of a statement of faith and they wrote a document about how they wanted to be together. And that was the kind of thing everyone could get around.
Of course.
Yeah, so it worked perfectly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, go on.
Well, okay, so then we started the Center for Progressive Christianity and a couple of years after that, and then I wrote a couple of books, and then in 2013, well, I'll go back to the books. In With or Without God, I identified as a non-theist, meaning I didn't believe in a being, but I realized after that many of my colleagues still had a supernatural element to the idea of a non-theistic God. So I needed to make sure that people didn't think that I did, because I didn't. Right. And so my second book, which came out in 2012, I identified as a theological non-realist, which of course no one understood. So I think the book has 2 or 3 pages explaining what that means. And then it was really out there. And a year later, I was moved by a couple of events that were happening on the world stage. One of them was Fazil Say, who is an internationally renowned Turkish pianist, had been sentenced to 10 months in prison for identifying as an atheist on social media.
Right.
And murders were beginning in Bangladesh about murders of secular bloggers. And 4 of them had recently been arrested and were being threatened with execution.
It's a capital offense in Saudi Arabia also.
Oh, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible, yes. So I, because my beliefs were consistent with beliefs, that identify as atheist, and because my denomination has taught me, and one of the reasons that I went into ministry in my denomination is because of its social justice and solidarity. So I publicly identified as an atheist with my board's support. They knew I was going to do that. And that seemed almost anticlimactic at the time. But a year later, when the Charlie Hebdo attacks took place in Paris, I wrote an open letter to the moderator of the United Church. There had been a prayer posted on the National Church's website, which did what, most churches, liberal church prayers do. They ask God to help them cope with something or move through a process, or they thank God for something that God is doing for them, all of which presupposes this theistic intervention of supernatural being.
Which was the reason that the murders took place in the first place. I mean,
I wrote, my letter said, that we cannot continue to posit that there is this supernatural moral authority, because if you do that, you have to stand aside when other people do it as well. You don't get to condemn them. And so, and I felt that it was the language of faith which is being held so strongly, not necessarily the theological understandings of it, but just simply the use of the language because it identifies us as Christian something.
Yes.
But it was the language that we had removed at West Hill. We had removed all of the theistic language. We stopped using the Bible regularly. We don't talk about Jesus. We've completely eliminated all that. So that letter caused some media attention, which was histrionic, and that I think triggered.
That's when you almost were tried for heresy, right?
That's right. Yeah, we went through a 3.5-year process with my congregation supporting me the entire way, and my denomination. I had started talking about is their relationship with me is a relationship with a caricature. They have not come to understand what it is that we do. They don't know why we do it. They haven't seen it as something that could be a positive move for a denomination which has been on the most progressive edge of Christianity its entire history. So that has been sad and troubling. But we did avoid it in November. We were prepared for a 5-week trial. And I think the #heresy trial was a little bit too upsetting for them.
I read a quote from your lawyer, Julian Falconer. Quote, both parties took a long look at the cost benefit of running a heresy trial and whether it was good for anyone, and the results speak for themselves. They recognize there's a place for Gretta, and there's no reason to separate the minister and the congregation.
Yes, so we're doing what we do.
Although the United Church still, it's a complete cognitive dissonance in their part. It issued a statement that the settlement doesn't alter in any way the belief of the United Church of Canada in God. As revealed to Christians in and through Jesus Christ. It's like tilt. They just didn't want to take you on, I think.
I think they were exhausted at that point in time. I certainly was. But I think that they unfortunately believe that they have to maintain that language, which when I speak about the language of the Christian faith, I speak about it being owned by the conservatives. You can be as liberal as you want. You can come up with very fancy definitions for what God means to you, which is what I had done, which was a very naturalistic thing about relationship. You can come up with those, but the conservatives still own that language. Yes. They're the ones that can say, this is what God means, right?
Yes. It's amazing. It's amazing, and particularly down here south of your border in Canada, where the founders, the framers, were deists or atheists or agnostics. And not for nothing did they have a firm wall between church and state. It is so enraging to see what is happening and has been happening for some time, which is, we hope now, climaxed with the extremity that is Trump, who is the living, breathing opposite of everything they supposedly stand for, and yet who they support.
I know, that's very interesting. Yeah. And troubling.
Yeah, well, it just means that their religion is, for nothing. Their politics is what has always motivated them. Gretta, tell me, this was not without some personal cost, because 2 of your marriages ended because of basically theological dispute. You must be the recipient of enormous amounts of hate mail as well as support. How have you gotten through this yourself? With the support of the congregation? Is that what's mostly done it, and your own ethics?
Absolutely. Both of my marriages, my last marriage, we sort of fell on either sides of the theological spectrum, and that marriage could be related to that. But my congregation is really what supported me going forward. And it has been exhausting. I was on leave last year for a time because it was just more than I could manage. Yeah. My husband is incredibly supportive and so articulate in this, so he can he could take on people on my behalf when I wasn't able to do that. And the members of the congregation actually have become so galvanized in their understanding of what it is that we do and how we do it that I think any minister would be delighted to have members of their congregation that could speak as truly and confidently about what they do and what they believe as the members of my congregation, which leads me to say, I must say, I have no idea what my congregants believe.
I was just going to ask.
I'd say there are traditional people there, traditional theists, there are atheists, there are everything in between, but we don't ask people. So people would ask me, well, how many people are regular believers in your church? I don't know. We don't have to know because what we're doing is drawing people together around a ground of values and meaning. And when they come together around that, they can talk about their beliefs if they want to, but we certainly don't exclude people based on beliefs.
Talk a little bit about the values and the meaning and that you do come around.
Well, there's a couple of things that we talk about pretty much all the time, and one is that we are working on being in right relationship with ourselves, with others, and that means people we know and people we will never know. So it may be people of 2 or 3 generations from now. We're in right relationship with them, are working toward that, and right relationship with the planet. So it's self, others, and the planet. And that's hard work. So how do you do that work? We come together every week and recognize first that we're grounded in the interconnectedness of life, right? That's a reality that no one can deny. So we are grounded in that. We choose to be guided by the value of love. And as soon as you say that and think about it for any amount of time, you recognize that people have different understandings of love, right? So with that at play, we try to grow in wisdom because we're trying to understand those things. So we're coming together to be grounded in interconnectedness, guided by love, and grow in wisdom. That's what we do together.
Wow. And also the forward-looking, even people who will live, many, many, many years from now, reminds me of Native American beliefs that every decision one makes should be made with 7 generations in mind, which is a real big wow.
And I have sometimes said that 7th generation is the God by which I will be judged for my actions now.
The mind that we are creating, the universe. Oh gosh, God! I wish I could hear one of your sermons. Have you taped any of them, or?
Yeah. There's a lot of them available on iTunes. We do have guest speakers occasionally as well. We certainly did over the last 3.5 years to try to give me a bit of time to be present to this process. But we do share them. We aren't live streaming or anything. We've talked about that, but I don't know whether we'll actually do that or not. But we do have people who travel over an hour each way to be with us on Sundays. We have a visitors and travelers lunch the first Sunday of every month so that people who are coming from a further distance can come and be with us. So it's meeting the need of a number of people, and what we think that we're doing is maintaining relationship with a community that supports and enhances our subjective well-being. So for me, the end game has never been saving the church. The end game is about saving civic engagement. And civic engagement is improved when we have a higher subjective well-being. And that often happens in congregations. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation published an article yesterday that notes that Canada is expecting to lose 9,000 churches in the next little bit. And that's about a third of the number of churches in the country. And that will be a devastating loss to small communities and to personal memory banks and to, historic stuff. But for me, the loss is the potential for relationship that those communities held and the social capital which has been invested in them.
Yes.
Once that social capital is gone, there's very little that replaces it. We isolate ourselves. We stick around with our friends, but we may not have those complex social relationships that happen in congregations.
Mm. And if we don't have a sense of community, I think it is replaced by a sense of tribalism.
Absolutely. I think you're quite right. I think that's very true. And
which is what you've seen happening here. I mean, not among younger people who are, by the way, it's now, I think, up to almost 20% declare themselves. They don't use the word atheist, but they say non-religious, non-observant, non-this, non-that. And I find that very encouraging because those also happen to be the most ethical and progressive kids, and visionary and aspirational ones. And their women are very much in the lead among them. They're diverse in every possible way. And they help bring about taking back the House just on a political electoral level, and are capable, I think, of much, much more. We've been working toward this down here, for quite some time.
Well, and we're a couple of generations, I think, ahead of you in terms of that moving away from the beliefs of Christianity, and that you're
ahead of us in a number of ways up there in Canada. I got to tell you.
But it's because of the social programs that we have.
That's right.
Every research piece shows that countries that move toward social democracy invest in public health and education, that those democracies are the ones where Christianity and religious belief, theistic belief, drops.
Yeah. Well, you are really just fantastic and very courageous and moral and ethical and funny and energetic and wise. So I thank you for existing.
Thank you.
And I hope people buy your books and check out your quote unquote sermons, lectures, talks, riffs on.
No, we call them perspectives.
Okay.
And the S at the end is in brackets, so that I'm sharing what my perspective is, and it's the responsibility of the people in the community to add that S, to add their perspective to it and share it outside.
Wow.
So the conversation we've just had about emotional manipulation or whatever we're talking about that Sunday, they hear what I think about it, and then they add what they think about it, and they'll have a conversation with their family or somebody around the bridge table or, those, because it's a very real piece of life that we talk about.
It's
every
grounded.
Sunday.
So it could be relationships, personal relationships, or political trends, or it could be about a book you've read. It could be in a sense, any kickoff point, right?
Absolutely. So I did a 8-week session on mindfulness, on the different benefits of mindfulness, and I'll pick up books. We focus quite a bit on climate things. We have, when we did our Truth and Reconciliation work up here, when the calls to action were published by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, we read one of them every single Sunday for 94 weeks.
Wow.
And we're now reading a member of the congregation who was trained by Al Gore at the Climate Reality Project. She does a climate moment every Sunday, which has changed lives in ways I would never have expected. People who have stopped eating meat, and people who think before they buy things. Like, it's not just an automatic, oh, that's okay. If you got the money to pay for it, get it. It's people are seriously considering what the implications of our current behaviors are on that seventh generation.
Wow.
Or on the next generation.
Or on right now, yes, indeed, all straight the way through. How large is the congregation?
We have about 80 or 90 on a Sunday. It's a small church in a very vibrant relationship. I have been saying publicly, and they hear me say this, that we still present a great white wall of seniors. We are, and we have not escaped that trajectory. We often have younger people come to be with us, but they're not reflected in the people who are there. So we often don't get them back.
I have one word for you. Music.
Oh, music. My husband does the music.
Okay, all right, because that should draw the young people, I think.
Yeah. Well, we can't sing anything in any hymn book, right?
Oh, no.
Yeah, but Scott is a former evangelical and wrote a lot of music in that world.
Mm-hmm.
So he has a very contemporary musical stuff and writes incredible music.
Mm-hmm.
And I write new words to traditional tunes so that people hear music that they feel. And we have tissues in our seats because we often have people in tears because they're given back a hymn that they thought they'd never be able to sing again.
Oh, reclaimed,
Absolutely,
recovering spiritual and civil people.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations, Gretta.
Thanks so much,
It's
Robin.
wonderful work that you do. I'm not surprised that it's a woman who's doing it. And we'll keep an eye on you and stay safe from the crazies and keep up the wonderful work.
Thank you so much, Robin. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you.
Time for one more break before we return with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
And welcome back again to some fighting words. As in past couple of weeks, throughout April, which is Poetry Month, I'm devoting fighting words as a segment to instead reading a poem or two. One today, and the theme I've chosen for April is the making of poetry. So I'm cheating a little bit today because this is actually about visual art and the making of a lithograph, but the process is not dissimilar. And the metaphor of the work that goes into creating a lithograph works just as well with the making of poetry, or, as the poem intends, with the making of a relationship, because it's also a sort of unspoken love poem. It's called Lithographers, and it first appeared in my book Upstairs in the Garden, Poems Selected and New, and it was written in the late 1980s. Lithographers. Lithography, the gallery program states, is based on the mutual antipathy of grease and water. We paced another rainy afternoon, slow in this my autumn elsewhere, on our planet someone's spring, our footsteps echoing museum marble corridors. Mostly women, motionless, gazed back at us, two women strolling past them where their images hung, printed, framed, a woman bathing, a woman sleeping, a woman waking tousled after love, a woman dancing, two women dancing together, a woman with green-lidded eyes waiting under a street lamp, a woman singing soundlessly, a woman smiling at a man but looking away, a woman doing up her hair. The stone will not retain its image unless its surface structure has been changed. Acid for this is necessary, the program cautions, so that the surface will accept the image only where it is intended. The stone is indiscriminate, like love. It must be drenched and drenched again to forestall the natural inclination of the surface, which otherwise would welcome any and all impressions, those hinted, those never meant for permanence, and those deliberately impressed to last, etched into stone. This is the work of loving, I did not say aloud. To drench and drench again, and etch itself in acid, to forestall the natural inclination of our surfaces, until the structure that we are is changed. The artist alters, embellishes, or simply continues to build the composition the program warns. This is the skill of loving, I did not name aloud. The process, lonely, patient, taking, as they say, great pains toward the perfecting, making trial proofs, experimental proofs, progressive proofs. The stone must be run through a press under considerable pressure. This is the weight of loving, I did not cry aloud. The flattening crush of its imprint, intaglio, beyond one's surfaces, transfiguring pores of stone past welcome or resistance, bearing down the burden of its message, terrifying as an enunciation, until the simplest elements, like grease and water, combine with vitriol, seethe back against the pressure, billow sudden azure silk out from the dancers' scarves, execute a woman waking, tousled after love, two women dancing together. And if the artist risks stone-calloused fingers, acid-splattered eyes, I did not ask aloud. Who is to judge it was not worth the hazarding? Perhaps you noticed, for I could not point it out, the small sign to remind us only a limited number of such prints are ever possible. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's our show for today. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheRobinMorgan and on Facebook at facebook.com/TheRobinMorgan. Check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book, Dark Matter, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for our show. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.